The space around Kepler Station looked like a graveyard. Broken pieces of ships floated everywhere, some still glowing red from the heat of battle. Admiral Zextar stood on the bridge of his massive bioship, watching the last coalition forces fight their final battle. The Vorthon ships moved through space like living creatures, because that's exactly what they were. Each ship had been grown, not built. They pulsed with organic life, their hulls breathing like skin, their weapons shooting beams that dissolved anything they touched. These living warships had crushed every enemy they faced for 3 long years. Sextar's own flagship was the size of a small moon. Its living walls pulsed around him as the ship's brain processed battle information. Thousands of smaller bioships surrounded the station, each one ready to strike the final blow. The Admiral felt satisfied as he watched coalition ships explode one by one. On Kepler Station, Captain Lyra Velchen ran through smoking corridors as explosions shook the walls. Her blue skin was covered in dust and her 4 arms moved quickly as she helped wounded soldiers. The station's defenses were failing. Warning lights flashed red everywhere. She reached the command center where dozens of different alien species worked at their stations. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others looked like giant insects with shiny shells. A few had multiple heads or eyes that glowed in the dark. All of them were scared, but they kept working. "Captain, the outer shields are down to 15%, called out Commander Thex, a spider-like being with 8 legs. His voice shook with fear. "Hull breaches on levels 40 through 60, added Lieutenant Cora, whose people looked like walking trees with bark-like skin. "We're losing atmosphere fast." Captain Velchen looked at the main screen. It showed hundreds of Vorthon bioships surrounding the station like hungry predators. Each ship was alive, and she could almost feel them wanting to feed on the destruction. The Altarian people, Velchen's species, had always been peaceful. They solved problems by talking, not fighting. But the Vorthons didn't want to talk. They only wanted to destroy or control everything they found. "How many people are still on the station?" she asked. "About 50,000, Thex replied. "Mostly civilians and wounded soldiers." Velchen closed her 4 eyes for a moment. 50,000 lives depending on her, and she had no way to save them. The coalition fleet was gone. Earth's human allies had disappeared 50 years ago. No help was coming. The Vorthons had started their war of conquest 3 years ago. They came from the dark edge of the galaxy with ships that seemed impossible. Their biotechnology was far beyond anything the coalition had ever seen. Worlds fell one by one. Entire species were either enslaved or completely destroyed. The coalition had tried to fight back. 17 different species had joined together, sharing their best weapons and strategies. But nothing worked against the living ships that could heal themselves and adapt to any attack. "Captain, they're launching boarding pods," Lieutenant Cora announced. Through the main screen, Velchen watched dozens of organic pods shoot out from the Vorthon ships. They looked like giant seeds or eggs, pulsing with sickly light as they flew toward the station. "Seal all airlocks. Get everyone to the safe zones," she ordered. But she knew it wouldn't matter. The Vorthon boarding pods could eat through any metal. Once they attached to the station's hull, they would dissolve holes and pour in Vorthon soldiers like an infection spreading through a body. The first pod hit the station with a wet sound that everyone could hear through the walls. Then another, and another. Soon dozens of pods were attached to the station, each one burning through the hull. "Ma'am, we're getting reports of Vorthon soldiers in the lower levels," Commander Thex said. His 8 eyes were wide with terror. Velchen had heard stories about what Vorthon soldiers looked like. They were tall and thin, with too many joints in their arms and legs. Their skin was gray and wet, and they had no faces, just smooth heads with a single eye in the center. They carried weapons that were part of their bodies, grown from their own flesh. More explosions shook the station. The lights flickered and went out for a few seconds before emergency power kicked in. Red warning lights bathed everything in bloody color. "Captain, the main reactor is failing," Cora reported. "We have maybe 10 minutes before total power loss. 10 minutes. That was all the time left for 50,000 people. All the time left for the last free station in this part of the galaxy." Velchen walked to the communications console. Her hand shook as she activated the long-range transmitter. She knew no one would answer, but she had to try. "This is Captain Lyra Velchen of Kepler Station," she spoke into the transmitter. "We are the last coalition forces in the Kepler system. The Vorthons have won. If anyone receives this message, please remember us. Remember that we tried to keep the galaxy free? She paused, thinking about the old days when the coalition was strong, when humans walked these same corridors, working alongside all the other species to build something better. If any humans are still out there, somewhere beyond the rim, please know that we never forgot you. You helped build the coalition. You believed we could all live together in peace. We're sorry we couldn't keep that dream alive. Behind her, she could hear weapons fire in the corridors. The Vorthon soldiers had reached the upper levels. It wouldn't be long now. The communication console sparked and died. The main screen went black. One by one, the lights on all the control panels went out. In the growing darkness, she could hear her crew saying goodbye to each other in their different languages. Some prayed to their gods. Others just held each other close. Through the station's windows, she could see the Vorthon bioships moving closer. Their organic hulls pulsed with satisfied hunger, like predators that had just finished feeding. Captain Velshen thought about her home world, with its blue oceans and crystal cities. The Vorthons had destroyed it 2 years ago. Now they would finish destroying everything else. The door to the command center melted. Through the smoking hole, gray shapes moved in the darkness. The Vorthon soldiers had arrived. As the first soldier stepped into the command center, its single eye glowing like a cold star, Captain Velshen stood straight and proud. She would not beg. She would not run. She was a coalition officer, and she would face the end with dignity. The station's final scream echoed through space as the Vorthon bioweapons consumed the last of its power. Then there was only silence, and the slow breathing of living ships as they fed on the remains of the last free outpost in the galaxy. Admiral Zextar watched the station die and felt nothing but satisfaction. Another enemy destroyed, another step closer to total victory. The galaxy would soon belong entirely to the Vorthon Empire, as it should be. But deep in space, beyond the edge of the system, something was stirring. Something that had been waiting 50 years for this moment. Something that had received Captain Velshen's final message. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Zextar felt good as he watched the last pieces of Kepler Station burn and drift apart. His bioship pulsed with pleasure around him, feeding on the radiation from the destroyed station. The living walls of his bridge glowed brighter, showing that the ship was happy with the victory. Around his flagship, hundreds of other Vorthon bioships moved slowly through the debris. They looked like massive sea creatures swimming through space, their organic hulls breathing and pulsing with life. Some were collecting useful materials from the wreckage. Others were hunting for any survivors who might be hiding. "Admiral," called his communications officer, a young Vorthon, whose bio-armor still had the bright colors of youth. "We're receiving reports from all sectors. The station is completely destroyed. No survivors detected." Zextar nodded with satisfaction. The Kepler system was now completely under Vorthon control, just like 90% of the known galaxy. Soon, there would be no more free worlds, no more coalition resistance, just the perfect order of the Vorthon Empire. "Excellent work," he said to his crew. "Signal the homeworlds. Tell them the Kepler system belongs to us now." But before the communications officer could respond, the sensor technician suddenly stood up from his station. The young Vorthons, bio-armor flashed with alarm colors, yellow and red stripes that showed confusion and fear. "Admiral, sir," the technician said, his voice shaking. "I'm reading something strange at the edge of the system." "Strange how?" Zextar asked, turning his attention to the main display screen. "There are gravitational distortions appearing near the outer planets, very large ones, but they're not natural." The main screen changed to show the edge of the Kepler system. At first, everything looked normal. Empty space with a few distant planets and asteroids. But then Zextar saw what had scared his sensor technician. Space itself was bending. Huge areas of stars looked twisted like someone was stretching them out of shape. Then they would snap back to normal, only to twist again somewhere else. Each distortion released waves of energy that made the bioship's sensors scream with warnings. "What is that?" Zextar demanded. "Unknown, sir," the technician replied. "Our biocomputers can't identify the energy signature. It's not hyperspace travel. It's not any technology we've ever seen." Zextar had been fighting wars for 30 years. He had conquered star systems and destroyed entire fleets, But he had never seen space bend like that. It looked wrong, like reality was breaking apart. "Could it be some kind of weapon?" he asked. "I don't know, sir. The energy readings don't match any known weapon system. It's almost like something is folding space." Then the first ship appeared. It came out of one of the twisted areas of space like a knife cutting through cloth. One moment there was just bent starlight, and the next moment there was a massive ship floating in the darkness. The ship looked completely different from anything in the galaxy. Vorthon bioships were curved and organic like living creatures. Coalition ships had been built with smooth, flowing lines. But this new ship was all angles and straight edges. It looked like it was made of metal and crystal with no organic parts at all. "By the void," whispered the sensor technician. "It's huge." He was right. The ship was even bigger than Zextar's flagship. But size wasn't what made it scary. It was the way it sat in space perfectly still, like a monument to some unknown intelligence. More twisted areas of space appeared. More ships came through. Within minutes there were dozens of them, then hundreds, each one the same angular design, each one sitting in perfect formation at the edge of the system. "Admiral," the communications officer said, "should we try to contact them?" Zextar stared at the growing fleet of strange ships. They didn't move like living creatures. They didn't pulse with organic life. They just sat there in space like cold metal statues, waiting for something. "Send them a challenge," he ordered. "Demand to know who they are and what they want in Vorthon space." The communications officer worked at his bio console, sending out messages in every known language. He tried coalition frequencies, Vorthon military channels, even the old diplomatic codes from before the war. Nothing. The strange ships didn't respond to any communication attempt. "Sir," the sensor technician called out again. "More ships are coming through, a lot more." The main screen showed space filling up with the angular vessels. They appeared in perfect rows, like soldiers marching in formation. But they were soldiers made of metal and crystal, not flesh and bone. "How many?" Zextar asked. "Over 800 now, sir. And they're still coming. 800 ships." That was almost as many as Zextar's entire fleet. But these ships were all the same size as his biggest bio-dreadnoughts. If they were warships, they represented more firepower than had ever been gathered in one place. "Admiral," his tactical officer spoke up. "They're moving." The strange fleet was indeed moving, but not like any ships Zextar had ever seen. They moved in perfect synchronization, as if they were all controlled by the same mind. No living creature could coordinate that perfectly, not even the hive minds that the coalition sometimes used. They were heading directly toward the Vorthon fleet. "Battle stations," Zextar ordered. "All ships prepare for combat." Around his flagship, the bioships began to wake up from their feeding. Their hulls changed color from the satisfied purple of feeding to the angry red of battle. Weapons that were part of their living bodies began to extend from their hulls. Biocannons that fired dissolved energy. Living missiles that could think and hunt their targets. "Sir, we're receiving a response from the unknown fleet," the communications officer announced. "Finally, put it on the main speaker." But what came through the speakers wasn't a voice. It was something else entirely. A sound that was too perfect, too precise to come from any living throat. It spoke in perfect coalition standard, the language that all the species had used for diplomacy. "Vorthon fleet, you are trespassing in protected space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The voice was cold and emotionless, like a machine speaking. But what shocked Zextar the most were the words themselves. Protected space? The coalition was dead. There was no one left to protect anything. "This is Admiral Zextar of the Vorthon Empire," he replied. "This system belongs to us by right of conquest. Identify yourselves or be destroyed." There was a long pause. Then the voice spoke again, and this time there was something different about it, something that might have been anger, if machines could feel anger. "We are the Earth Defense Fleet. You have 10 seconds to begin withdrawal. Earth Defense Fleet." Zextar felt his bio-armor flash with confusion. Earth was the human home world, but the humans had disappeared 50 years ago. Everyone knew they had run away when the real fighting started. "Sir," his tactical officer said urgently, "they're powering weapons." "Impossible," Zextar said. "The humans are cowards. They ran away the first time they faced real war." But on the main screen, he could see energy building up along the hulls of the strange ships. Not the organic glow of bioweapons, but something else. Something that made space itself shimmer around them. 5 seconds, the cold voice announced. Zextar had fought too many battles to hesitate when facing an unknown enemy. "All ships, attack formation. Destroy them before they can fire." His bioships moved forward, their living hulls rippling with excitement. They had never lost a battle. Their organic weapons could adapt to any defense. Their living armor could heal from any damage. The strange, angular ships just waited, sitting in space like tombstones. "Time's up," the cold voice said. That's when Zextar learned that everything he thought he knew about war was wrong. The battle began so fast that his organic brain couldn't process what was happening. One moment his fleet was charging toward the enemy. The next moment space around his ships was filled with something that looked like controlled lightning. His bioships started to dissolve, not exploding, not burning, dissolving like they were melting in acid. The living hulls that had survived. Every weapon in the galaxy simply came apart at the molecular level. "What's happening?" he screamed. But there was no answer. His bridge crew was staring in shock at their screens, watching the impossible destruction of their fleet. Ships that had conquered star systems were falling apart like sandcastles in the rain. Through his ship's organic sensors, Zextar could feel his flagship screaming in pain as whatever the humans were shooting ate through its living hull. The bioship that had been his home for 20 years was dying around him. The last thing he saw was one of the angular human ships moving past his dissolving bridge, its metal hull reflecting the light of his dying fleet. Deep inside the lead ship of the human fleet, Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood in a command center that would have amazed any alien who saw it. Instead of organic controls or crystal matrices, the room was filled with screens and computers that glowed with clean white light. Humans in dark blue uniforms moved between stations with practiced efficiency. Chen was a tall woman with gray hair and calm eyes that had seen too many battles. She wore a simple uniform with admiral stars on her shoulders. Behind her, a massive screen showed the tactical situation in the Kepler system. 50 years ago, humanity had indeed vanished from known space. But they hadn't fled in defeat. They had retreated to the dark spaces between stars to prepare for this moment. "Admiral, we have visual confirmation of the Vorthon fleet," reported Commander Torres, her tactical officer. 843 bioships of various classes. "They're moving to intercept," Chen nodded calmly. "Any response to our warning?" "Negative, ma'am. They're maintaining attack formation." Chen had expected that. The Vorthons had never negotiated with anyone. They only understood force. That was fine. Humanity had spent 50 years learning how to speak their language. "Status of the rescue operation?" she asked. "Medical ships are standing by," replied Dr. Kim from the medical station. "We've detected life signs in the debris around Kepler Station. Looks like some coalition personnel survived in emergency shelters." That was good news. When humanity had received Captain Velshin's final transmission, carried across the galaxy by their quantum communication network, they had immediately begun preparing for this rescue mission. They were 50 years too late to save the coalition, but maybe they could still save some of the people. "Commander Zhang," Chen called to her weapons officer. "Are all ships ready?" "Yes, ma'am. All vessels are linked to the tactical network. Dissolution field generators are charged and ready." Chen looked around her bridge. Every officer was human, but they worked with computers and artificial intelligence systems that were far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. During their 50 years of exile, humanity had learned to combine biological intuition with digital precision. The screens around the bridge showed data streaming from hundreds of sources. Every ship in the fleet was connected to every other ship through quantum communication links that worked faster than light. When one ship's sensors detected something, all ships knew about it instantly. "Admiral," Lieutenant Park at the sensor station announced, "the Vorthon fleet is broadcasting a challenge. Audio translation coming through now." The voice that came through the speakers was alien and harsh, speaking in the bioacoustic language of the Vorthons. The computer translated it into English. This is Admiral Zextar of the Vorthan Empire. This system belongs to us by right of conquest. Identify yourselves or be destroyed. Chen almost smiled. The Vorthans thought they were still fighting the same weak species that had run away 50 years ago. They had no idea what humanity had become. Open a channel, she ordered. When the communication link was established, Chen spoke in a clear, cold voice. Vorthan fleet, you are trespassing in protected space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. There was a pause before the alien admiral replied with typical Vorthan arrogance, demanding to know who they were and threatening destruction. We are the Earth Defense Fleet, Chen said calmly. You have 10 seconds to begin withdrawal. She cut the communication and turned to her weapons officer. Begin final preparations. Execute sterilization protocol on my command. Commander Zhang's fingers moved quickly over his console. Around the bridge, other officers made final checks of their systems. Everything was ready. Chen thought back to the dark years after humanity's retreat from Coalition space. They had learned hard lessons about survival in a hostile galaxy. The Coalition had been built on the idea that all intelligent species could work together peacefully. It was a beautiful dream, but the Vorthans had shattered it completely. Humanity had tried to fight alongside their alien allies using conventional weapons and tactics. They had lost every battle. Their ships were too slow, their weapons too weak, their reflexes too sluggish compared to the bioengineered perfection of their enemies. So they had done what humans do best. They had adapted. While the galaxy burned under Vorthan conquest, human scientists and engineers worked in secret bases hidden in dead star systems. They didn't try to out-evolve their enemies. Instead, they focused on outthinking them. The quantum fold drives that had brought them here were just the beginning. They had developed artificial intelligence systems that could think and react faster than any biological brain. They had created weapons that attacked matter itself at the atomic level. Most importantly, they had learned to fight as a single coordinated force instead of individual ships. 5 seconds, Chen announced. On the main screen, she could see the Vorthan bioships moving into attack formation. They were beautiful in their own way, like massive sea creatures swimming through space. Their organic hulls pulsed with life and their bioweapons glowed with deadly energy. But they were still biological. They still needed time to process information and react to threats. Time was something humanity would not give them. Time's up, Chen said quietly. Execute sterilization protocol. All ships begin. What happened next was the result of 50 years of human innovation and determination. Every ship in the fleet fired at exactly the same moment, their quantum-linked AI systems coordinating the attack with perfect precision. The weapons they used were called dissolution field generators. Instead of shooting energy or projectiles, they created areas of space where the fundamental forces that held atoms together simply stopped working. Any matter caught in these fields instantly broke apart at the molecular level. Chen watched the tactical display as the Vorthan fleet began to dissolve. The bioships that had conquered most of the galaxy were simply coming apart, their living hulls unable to maintain cohesion in the dissolution fields. Target neutralization proceeding as planned, Commander Zhang reported. Estimated time to complete destruction, 7 seconds. 7 seconds to destroy the most powerful war fleet in galactic history. The Vorthans had no time to adapt, no time to evolve defenses, no time to retreat. Their biological advantages meant nothing against an attack that happened faster than their nervous systems could respond. Admiral, Dr. Kim called out, we're detecting survivors in the debris field around Kepler Station. Requesting permission to begin rescue operations. Granted. Deploy medical ships immediately. Chen turned her attention to the rescue mission. As her fleet methodically destroyed the Vorthan forces, her medical ships were already moving toward the wreckage of the station. Their sensors had found Coalition personnel still alive in emergency bunkers and escape pods. One of those survivors was Captain Vel Shen, the Altarian officer whose final transmission had triggered humanity's return. Chen had listened to that message dozens of times during the journey to Kepler system. The captain's words about remembering humanity and keeping the dream of the Coalition alive had affected every human in the fleet. Ma'am, Lieutenant Park announced, Vorthan fleet is completely neutralized. No surviving vessels detected? Any distress calls or escape pods? Negative. Total destruction achieved, Chen nodded. The Vorthans had shown no mercy to civilian populations during their conquest. They had enslaved or exterminated entire species. Humanity would not make the mistake of showing them mercy they had never given to others. But the surviving coalition personnel were different. They were the people humanity had failed to protect 50 years ago. Now finally they had a chance to make up for that failure. Commander Torres signaled the construction ships. Begin rebuilding operations around Kepler Station. Full facilities, medical, residential, and defensive. Yes, ma'am. What about the quantum communication array? Install it immediately. I want to be able to talk to Earth Command in real time. As her orders were carried out, Chen looked out at the space where the Vorthan fleet had been. There was nothing left but slowly expanding clouds of atoms. The most feared military force in the galaxy had lasted exactly 7 seconds against human technology. But Chen didn't feel pride or satisfaction. She felt only a cold determination to finish what they had started. The Kepler system was just one small part of the galaxy. There were still billions of enslaved people waiting for liberation. Set course for the next Vorthan-occupied system, she ordered. We have work to do. The battle that would be remembered as the 7-second war began before the Vorthans realized they were already dead. Admiral Sextar's bioship screamed a war cry that echoed through space as his fleet charged toward the human vessels. 843 living warships moved forward like a pack of predators, their organic hulls rippling with excitement. Bioweapons extended from their bodies like claws, ready to tear apart these strange angular ships. But the human fleet didn't react like prey. They didn't scatter or try to escape. Instead, they moved with a precision that was impossible for biological creatures to achieve. Every human ship turned at exactly the same angle. Every weapon system powered up at exactly the same instant. Every targeting computer locked onto its assigned target with perfect synchronization. It was like watching a single organism with 800 bodies, all controlled by one mind. In the first second of the battle, while Vorthan neural networks were still processing the threat and calculating responses, the human ships fired. What came from their weapons wasn't energy beams or missiles. It looked like controlled lightning, but it moved through space in ways that violated everything the Vorthans knew about physics. The dissolution field spread out from the human ships like invisible death, reaching toward the biofleet at the speed of light. Admiral Zextar watched in horror as the leading edge of his fleet simply began to fall apart. The massive bio-dreadnought Living Storm, which had conquered 12 star systems, started dissolving from the front backward. Its living hull, which could heal from any damage and adapt to any weapon, just came apart like it was made of sand. What's happening to our ships? He screamed at his crew. His sensor technician, whose bio-armor was flashing panic colors of white and yellow, stared at his readings with wide eyes. Sir, the molecular bonds in our hull materials are breaking down. It's like the forces that hold atoms together are just stopping. That was impossible. Nothing could make atomic forces stop working. But Zexatar could see it happening on the main screen as ship after ship in his fleet dissolved into clouds of loose atoms. In the second, the dissolution fields reached the middle of the Vorthan formation. Biocruisers that had been built to last for centuries crumbled like ancient paper. Their living computers, bred for tactical brilliance, had no time to calculate a response before they ceased to exist. The Vorthan biotechnology that had made them masters of the galaxy was useless against this attack. Their ships could adapt to energy weapons by changing their hull composition. They could heal from physical damage by regenerating tissue, but they couldn't adapt to having the basic structure of matter itself break down around them. Commander Velkorth, captain of the biocruiser Devouring Darkness, tried desperately to order evasive maneuvers, but his ship's nervous system, which normally responded to his thoughts in milliseconds, was too slow. By the time his bioship began to turn, the dissolution field had already reached its hull. The ship's living brain sent out a psychic scream of pain that every Vorthan in the fleet could feel. Then it was gone, reduced to a cloud of component atoms drifting through space. In the third second, Zextar realized that his entire fleet was going to die, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Emergency retreat, he ordered. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace. But bioships needed time to prepare for hyperspace jumps. Their living engines had to build up energy slowly, and their organic navigation systems needed several seconds to calculate safe jump coordinates. The dissolution fields were moving too fast. The human weapons moved at light speed, but the Vorthan biotechnology worked at the speed of nerve impulses and biochemical reactions. In a battle where victory was measured in milliseconds, biology couldn't compete with digital precision. By the fourth second, half of the Vorthan fleet had been destroyed. The remaining ships were trying everything they could think of, firing their bioweapons wildly, attempting to ram the human vessels, calling for reinforcements that would never arrive. Nothing worked. The human ships moved like they could predict the future, avoiding every attack with mechanical perfection. Their quantum-linked AI systems shared information faster than thought, allowing them to coordinate their movements with impossible precision. Captain Thexkala of the bio-destroyer Silent Death managed to get close enough to one of the human ships to fire a direct hit with her most powerful biocannon. The living weapon, bred specifically to penetrate any known armor, struck the angular hull dead center. The beam that could melt through a planet's crust bounced off the human ship's armor like light off a mirror. The human vessel didn't even slow down as it continued its systematic destruction of the Vorthan fleet. In the fifth second, Admiral Zextar felt his own flagship begin to shake as dissolution fields reached its outer hull. The bioship that had been his home for 30 years was dying around him, its living walls screaming in pain as they dissolved. Admiral, his communications officer called out, "I'm receiving surrender requests from the surviving ships," but there was no one to surrender to. The human fleet wasn't accepting surrenders or taking prisoners. They were simply and efficiently destroying every Vorthan vessel in the system with cold mechanical precision. Zextar thought about his empire, stretching across thousands of star systems, populated by trillions of Vorthans. He thought about the slave worlds where conquered species served their new masters. He thought about the perfect order that the Vorthan Empire had brought to the galaxy. In the sixth second, he realized that all of it was about to end. The humans hadn't just returned. They had evolved into something the galaxy had never seen before. They fought like machines, but with the creativity and determination of living beings. They were biological minds controlling digital bodies, organic intelligence directing artificial systems. The Vorthan Empire had conquered the galaxy by being the most perfectly evolved biological warriors. But the humans had stepped outside biology entirely. Through his dying ship's sensors, Zextar could see the human vessels moving through the debris of his fleet. They weren't celebrating or gloating over their victory. They were already moving on to their next task with the same mechanical efficiency they had shown in battle. Some of the human ships were breaking off from the main fleet and heading toward the wreckage of Kepler Station. Their sensors had detected life signs. In the debris, Coalition survivors who had somehow lived through the station's destruction. The humans were going to rescue them. That was when Zextar understood, something that filled him with more terror than the dissolution of his fleet. The humans weren't just efficient killers. They were efficient at everything. They could destroy their enemies and save their friends with the same cold precision. In the seventh and final second, Admiral Zextar's flagship dissolved around him. The bioship's living brain died with a final psychic scream that echoed across space. The Admiral himself lasted just long enough to see the last of his mighty fleet reduced to drifting atoms. The 7-second war was over. The greatest military force in galactic history had been completely destroyed in less time than it took to take a breath. In the silence that followed, the human medical ships reached the wreckage of Kepler Station. Their sensors quickly located the Coalition survivors hiding in emergency shelters deep within the station's ruins. Rescue teams in advanced environmental suits began cutting through the debris to reach them. Captain Velshen was one of the first to be rescued. When human soldiers pulled her from her collapsed command center, she was barely conscious and couldn't believe what she was seeing. The humans looked exactly as she remembered from the old diplomatic files, but their equipment was far beyond anything the Coalition had ever developed. "We received your transmission," the team leader told her through a universal translator. "We're sorry we're late." As medical teams treated her injuries, Velshen stared through the rescue ship's windows at the space where the mighty Vorthan fleet had been. There was nothing left but slowly expanding clouds of atoms, glowing faintly in the starlight. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated the Vorthans in a battle that lasted only 7 seconds. But even more amazing was what they were doing now, working with tireless efficiency to save every Coalition survivor they could find. While their construction ships began rebuilding Kepler Station, with technologies that seemed like magic. As she watched the humans work, Captain Velshin began to understand that something fundamental had changed in the galaxy. The war was over, but she wasn't sure the universe was ready for whatever came next. 3 days after the 7-second war, Captain Velshin walked through the corridors of the new Kepler station, still amazed by what the humans had built. Where her old command center had been destroyed metal and broken dreams, now there were clean white walls and gentle lighting that seemed to know exactly how bright to be for her Altarian eyes. The human medical bay where she had recovered looked like something from a fantasy story. Machines monitored her health without being attached to her body. Beds that adjusted themselves to fit her four-armed anatomy perfectly. Medicine that seemed to know exactly what her body needed before she felt any symptoms. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the human medical officer who had treated her, walked beside her as they toured the rebuilt station. The doctor was a small woman with kind eyes and graying hair, wearing a simple white coat over her blue uniform. "How do you feel?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Better than I have in years," Velshin replied honestly. "Your medical technology is incredible. My people haven't seen healing like this since before the war started." They stopped at one of the large windows that looked out into space. Where Admiral Zextar's fleet had once floated in victorious formation, now there were dozens of human ships working together like a well-organized city. Some were medical vessels treating wounded coalition survivors. Others were construction ships building new facilities. A few were warships standing guard against any remaining Vorthon forces. "Captain," Dr. Martinez said quietly, "there's something Admiral Chen wants to discuss with you." "About what happens next," Velshin nodded. She had been expecting this conversation. As the highest-ranking coalition officer to survive the battle, she would need to help decide the future of the thousands of refugees the humans had rescued. They made their way to the station's new command center, which was unlike anything Velshin had ever seen. Instead of the organic curves and crystal formations that most galactic species preferred, the humans had built a room of clean lines and efficient design. Screens and computers were everywhere, all of them displaying information at a speed that was hard for organic eyes to follow. Fleet Admiral Sarah Chen stood at the center of it all, watching data streams from across the galaxy. She was a tall woman with calm gray eyes that seemed to see everything. When she noticed Velshin approaching, she smiled with genuine warmth. "Captain, it's good to see you up and moving. How are you feeling?" "Much better, thanks to your medical teams," Velshin replied. "Admiral, I need to ask, what are your intentions for the Coalition survivors?" Chen gestured toward a large screen that showed a map of the galaxy. Most of it was colored red, indicating Vorthon-controlled space. Only small scattered areas showed green for liberated systems. "We're going to free them all," Chen said simply. "Every enslaved world, every prison planet, every species under Vorthon control. The war isn't over, it's just beginning." Velshin stared at the map. "All of it?" "Admiral, there are thousands of Vorthon-controlled systems, billions of their bioships. How can even your advanced technology handle that?" "Because we're not fighting them the way everyone else did," Chen explained. "Watch." The screen changed to show real-time footage from across the galaxy. In system after system, human fleets were appearing through their quantum-fold drives. Each battle followed the same pattern as Kepler. Vorthon fleets destroyed in seconds, survivors rescued, worlds liberated. "We've been planning this for 50 years, Chen continued. "Every Vorthon fleet position, every slave world, every strategic resource. We know where they all are and we're hitting them simultaneously." Simultaneously? Velshin couldn't hide her amazement. "Across the entire galaxy? Our quantum communication network lets us coordinate operations instantly across any distance. While we were talking to you here, 17 other Vorthon fleets have been destroyed and 43 worlds have been liberated." Chen touched a control, and the screen showed detailed footage from one of the liberation operations. A human fleet had just destroyed a Vorthon biofleet above a planet covered in slave camps. Human ships were landing on the surface, and armored soldiers were freeing thousands of prisoners from different species. "The Coalition believed in negotiation and cooperation," Chen said. "Those are good things, but they don't work against an enemy that only understands force. So we learned to speak their language better than they do." Velshin watched the liberation footage with tears in her 4 eyes. She saw Altarians like herself being freed from prison camps. She saw Centauri warriors who had thought they would die as slaves. She saw dozens of species she thought had been extinct. all being rescued by human soldiers who moved with that same mechanical precision they showed in battle. "How many of you are there?" she asked. 8 billion humans spread across 40,000 ships, Chen replied. "We've been building and preparing for this day since we left Coalition space 50 years ago. 8 billion humans." Velshen tried to imagine that many people, all working toward the same goal with perfect coordination. No wonder they could fight a galaxy-wide war and win, but why? She asked. "Your people could have stayed hidden and safe. Why risk everything to save us?" Chen was quiet for a moment, looking at the liberation footage. "Because 50 years ago we made a promise. The Coalition stood for the idea that different species could work together in peace. When we left, we promised we would come back when we were strong enough to defend that dream." She turned to look directly at Velshen. "Your final transmission from Kepler Station reminded us that promise was still waiting to be kept." The screen changed again, showing something that made Velshen gasp. It was Earth, the human homeworld, but not as she remembered it from the old diplomatic files. The planet was surrounded by massive space stations and construction facilities that stretched from the surface to far beyond the moon. Millions of ships were docked at orbital shipyards, and the space between planets was filled with human activity. "You've been busy," she said quietly. "We had to completely reimagine what it means to be human," Chen explained. "The old Coalition tried to fight biological warfare with biological responses. Ship against ship, soldier against soldier, mind against mind. We realized that was a losing strategy." Chen gestured toward her command center, where human officers worked alongside artificial intelligence systems that processed information at the speed of light. "So we became something new. We kept our humanity, our creativity, our compassion, our ability to work together. But we enhanced it with technology that lets us think and act faster than any purely biological species." "Is that what makes you so effective in battle?" Velshen asked, partially. "But the real advantage is coordination. Every human ship is connected to every other human ship through quantum communication links. When one of us learns something, we all know it instantly. When one of us makes a decision, we can all act on it at the same time." Velshen thought about the 7-Second War, where hundreds of human ships had acted as one organism. No biological species could coordinate like that, not even the Vorthons with their advanced biotechnology. "What about us?" she asked. "The Coalition survivors, I mean. What's our place in this new galaxy?" Chen smiled. "The same as it always was. We're not conquerors, Captain. We're liberators. Once we finish removing the Vorthon Empire, we'll help you rebuild the Coalition. Stronger this time and better protected." The screen showed more liberation footage, this time focusing on the aftermath. Human medical teams treating wounded prisoners. Human engineers helping rebuild damaged worlds. Human teachers working with alien children who had been born in slavery and had never known freedom. "The galaxy is big enough for all of us," Chen continued. "Humans, Altarians, Centauri, all the species the Vorthons enslaved, will work together again, just like we dreamed in the old days." But as Velshen watched the human efficiency in action, she wondered if the galaxy was really ready for what humanity had become. They moved like machines but cared like living beings. They fought with cold precision but showed warm compassion to the people they saved. "Admiral," she said carefully, "are you still human?" Chen was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. "We're what humanity chose to become," she finally said. "We kept the parts of ourselves that we valued, our ability to care, to create, to dream of something better. But we changed the parts that were holding us back, our limitations, our slow reactions, our inability to work together perfectly." She gestured toward the screen, which now showed human fleets moving across the galaxy like a tide of liberation. The Vorthons thought biology was destiny. They believed that because they were more perfectly evolved, they deserved to rule everyone else. We proved them wrong. Intelligence isn't about biology, it's about choice. We chose to become something that could protect the innocent and defend the dream of peaceful cooperation. As if to prove her point, the quantum communication system activated with a soft chime. Admiral Chen listened to a report that lasted only seconds, then smiled. "The Vorthon homeworld has just surrendered," she announced. "The war is over." Across the command center, human officers and alien survivors began to cheer. But Chen remained calm, already focused on the next challenge. Thank you for watching and comment for next part.